Hey, welcome back. This is episode 10, where we're building clearbnb, a vacation rental platform on Ruby on Rails, to go through the process of just building out a bunch of different features. In the last episode, we did some image uploading with active storage. In this episode, what I wanted to do was build out, work on our listing detail page just a little bit and add a button so that someone could actually book a listing. So right now we don't actually have prices for listings. We don't have anything about cleaning fees or any of that. And so what I want to do is add some data that we can use to track the price for a night at a listing, and then a button to book the listing. And then just clean up the listing show page. So what I'm going to do is use Stripe checkout, which is a Stripe hosted thing that you'll like redirect customers to, and they can pay directly through Stripe checkout. In practice, you should be able to set a different nightly rate for every single date, because based on demand, you might want to say have like a really high price for 4th of July weekend, but a really low price for just a random weekend in September or something, right? And so that's like a really common practice in the industry, is to have the ability to set prices per day in sort of a calendar. We don't have any calendaring systems yet. So what we're going to do is, for now, we're just going to store the price for a night on the listing model itself. So let's do that first. So Rails G migration, add price to listing, and price is going to be an integer, and we're going to store it in cents, so that we don't have to do any, so that math is easier, because working with floating point numbers in math is no fun. So let's just make sure this looks good. Yeah, we're adding price. It's an integer. I guess it could only be positive, but we can add validations like inside of the model. Default. No, I don't know. Let's just leave it as is. So Rails Db Migrate. So I was thinking we could make the default 0, but then we don't want someone to accidentally publish a listing and make it bookable for $0 a night. You know what? The other thing, let's do Rails DB rollback, because the other thing I think we're going to want is to distinguish between the nightly price or the per night price and the cleaning fee. So we might also want taxes or something. So let's add price to listing. Let's get this a little bit, let's make this a little fancier. So nightly price, and then cleaning fee. And then cleaning fee is going to be a flat fee for the entire stay. And then tax, tax percentage. And that should be a float. Should we deal? Let's just skip taxes for now. We'll skip taxes for now. All right, so we're gonna have a nightly price. It's gonna be an integer. If you stay 3 nights, we're gonna do the nightly price times 3 plus the cleaning fee. That's it. Boom. That's what you pay, right? All right, and then okay. So Rails DB Migrate. I'm going to run bundle exec annotate models again, so that we can update all of our models with a comment that shows which fields are in there. We'll jump into our listing here, and inside of our listing, we now have a nightly price and a cleaning fee. We want to say validates that the nightly price numericality is greater than 0 and less than I think there's, okay, we'll just not have a less than. There are limitations to how much you can charge when you're inside of Stripe, but it's a very, very high number, and it's not going to be what people are paying per night. So whatever. We also want to do the same thing for cleaning fee. I think, again, in practice, we're going to want some model that is separate from the listing that tracks prices and cleaning fees and the nights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But let's just work on getting our feet underneath us in terms of booking and figuring out how to pay and stuff like that. Again, this is going to be in cents. I probably should have said nightly price in cents, but whatever. That's fine. So listing edit. So inside of our listing edit form, let's just add a price. I guess this is a nightly price. Nightly price. I mean, that could sort of be part of the feature, right? Of this sort of clearbnb transparent pricing platform, is to have just a one fixed price, right? But yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, whatever. And then this is going to be cleaning fee and cleaning fee. The minimum one, step one. All right, so then if we come back over here to our listings and we pull one up and we say edit the details, we now have a nightly price and a cleaning fee. And we need to go to our controller, host listings controller. And in here, we need to allow the nightly price and the cleaning fee to be passed in on update. I think I want to make those also pass, like something you can pass in on create. So let's just grab those and come over to the new view and also add them here. And I think we like dressed up the new view a little bit more, but whatever. Okay, so let's say that our nightly price is $100. Our cleaning fee is $50. We're going to update the listing, see if that takes. Nightly. Oh, right. And this is also in cents. So we need to add zeros on the end. So here's our nightly price, $100, and our cleaning fee is $50. Okay, so now we're tracking the pricing for a listing on the listing itself. That is fantastic. Let's go over to the listing show view for normal listings. So this is all the published listings. I guess we want to, maybe we'll just grab listing 102 and, oh, it's not published. So I'm actually just going to say, what are we going to do? Listing dot update or like, yeah, listing dot all or like dot update all. Does that work? Status published or yeah. I basically want to make them all published so that I don't keep running this 404 while we're testing. Okay, so on our listing show page, on our public listing show page, we want to have the price. So here we can say, we'll just, yeah, let's say this is class text 2XL, font bold, margin bottom 4. Then we'll give it a price here. When I'm looking for semantic tags, I always like get so confused about like which ones I should use, or I get stuck on like analyzing whether or not I should use one, and then I just end up giving up and using divs and p tags everywhere. I know it's not a good practice, but it's, yeah. It allows you to move quickly, right? Okay, so there's another thing that you can use inside of Rails, which is like a currency formatter. So Rails currency, I can never remember. Yes, number to currency. Which is super cool. So yeah, like you can say, that's just like in the view, we could say like, instead of having the $sign out front right here, right? We can say number to currency, and then we can pass in our number and it should just give us back a currency, and it does. And right now it has like the cents are showing, but we could say, take off the precision. So precision is 0 or something, right? And so now it only just shows like in dollars, which is cool. The other thing we can do is if we, yeah, like I think, the unit. Yeah, so if I say unit like EUR, does that work? Let's see. Oh no, okay. So I thought I'd be able to pull out like, I wonder if the locale would do that. No, it looks like that just changes the format. Unit separator delimiter unit is that currency, whatever. Okay, fine. We're starting off with USD, and then like later on we can mess around with other stuff. Okay, so we've got you 100. This is like per night. And then we also want the cleaning fee. And this is going to be cleaning fee. All right, so we've got our per night fee and we've got our cleaning fee. And we have where it's at, the about us, how many beds or rooms or whatever. We've got some pictures and we've got some details about the host down below. And for now, let's just put the email again. Oftentimes the host will be asked to like write a little profile about themselves or whatever, and that we can show later on. And now let's also add a button to book. So we'll just say, how do we want this to work? So we want to reserve it, right? And long term, we want to make the reservations for specific dates. But for now, let's just say this is going to send a post request to reservations. I'm trying to think if we need to preview anything or if we can just say like reserve. Not sure. Okay, but what we do want to do is we want to pass back the listing. So input type is hidden. So I'm trying to think through how we could set this up. So basically we want to create some concept of a reservation between the current user as the guest and between the listing as where they're going to stay. And we also want to somehow charge them money for this reservation. And so right now what I'm thinking is we'll have a form that just has a button that says reserve. When you click on reserve, you'll be redirected to Stripe checkout, where you'll be prompted to pay that listing's nightly price plus cleaning fee. We also need to create a reservation model internally. And that reservation model should be tied somehow back to the listing and also back to the payment, the checkout payment. So one way we could do that is we could like nest the reservations endpoint under listing. So it's like /listing/101/reservations. And that's like how you make the post request. And that's how you get the listing ID for which the reservation is for. But I'm thinking about just passing the listing, the ID for the listing inside of a hidden field here, and we'll call it reservation listing ID. And this will have the value, which is the listing.id. And let's see. So we've got a reserve button. We click on this. It's a post to reservations. We don't even have a reservations controller yet. We have no concept of a reservation. So let's work on that. Rails G controller, or no, Rails G model reservation. And this is going to reference the listing, and that reservation is also going to have some sort of payment related to it. So I think what we can do is store the checkout session ID from Stripe. So session ID, which is a string. What else is the reservation going to have? This is going to have reference back to the guest. References guest. I can't remember if it's reference or references. References listing, references guest. And the guest in this case is going to be a user. So we're going to have to like set the foreign key thing again, or like tell it which table it's for. And then also we need to have a reservation is generally going to have a status. And that status can be one of like pending, booked, or canceled, I think. But again, we're going to use an enum for this, and we'll just set up a status to start. A reservation will also have generally like a number of guests. A reservation typically will also have like the check-in date and the checkout date and some conversation back and forth, like, between the host and guest communicating what is involved. But for now, let's start with this, and let's not even put the number of guests. Like, we can add that stuff later. So here we go. We're generating a reservation model. References with unknown type listing. Reference listing. What is that? Unknown type listing. This is totally a type, right? References guest. Let's take this one. Listing. I don't know why that's not working. Just take a look at the database migration. So we definitely have t.references. Yeah, so this should be like t.references listing. And the one that I was curious about was, okay, so here we have references host, and then we have the foreign key to table users. Because when we're naming the column differently than what we are naming, we're naming the column different from what the underlying table is. So in this case, like, any user of clearbnb can be a guest on a reservation. And so we're going to call the column in the database guest underscore ID, but that will point at a user. And it's nice to have this as guest. So now that we can, when we're looking at the reservation, it's clear which user that is. That's the guest user. That's not the host. That's not the, cleaner or whatever. That is the guest. So that is convenient. And why we do that, I'll say default to 0 here. I did get feedback that when you're using an enum field that you shouldn't set the default in the migration. And again, I'm torn about whether or not I agree with that. We could, so as we're thinking through other things that are related to this migration, one thing you might think is like, oh, let's create a uniqueness constraint between, or like some sort of index that has like guest and listing, and that'll like be a way that we can like really quickly look up the reservations. And in fact, you might like feel like maybe you want to make it unique. So a guest can only book a listing, or there's like no conflict, and we only create one reservation for the guest in that listing. But in practice, like, a guest might come back year after year or quarter after quarter and book the same listing. And so I would just leave off those constraints for now and call that good. Rails DB Migrate. Hopefully this works. I don't know what the deal was with that reference thing not working before. So now we can look at our reservation, and this is going to belong to a listing and belong to a guest. And we'll do our annotate deal again to get that up and running. Okay, so now we should be able to create reservations. Actually, you know what? I think we need a reservations controller, right? Reservations controller. Yeah, we don't have one of those yet. So let's make one of those. Rails G controller reservations. So we are going to have the guest reservations controller. This is where we're going to create reservations. It'll also be, I guess, where the guest can see their own reservations that they've booked. And then on the host side, we'll want to be able to see like which guests are you hosting that are upcoming. So for this reservation controller, this is going to be the top level one for guests. So we want to have like an index. We want to have a show. We want to have a we might want an edit view. I don't know. We'll just keep it like this for now. Go to our routes file, resources, reservations. I'm not going to add any constraints yet because I'm not sure exactly how flexible we want this to be. Reservations controller. Inside of the create action, we want to create a reservation. So at reservation is equal to current user.reservations.new reservation params. We need to make sure that the user model has many reservations. And we have to set the foreign key. Foreign key is guest ID. And okay, so the reservation params are going to be params.require reservation.permit the listing ID, and I think that's all we have on our form, right? Like listing show, we've got our form here and it just has the listing ID, and I think that's it. So if reservation.save, then we want to like create a Stripe checkout session. Else we want to say flash errors, or maybe like, flash errors, reservation.errors.full messages, and redirect to listing path for params reservation listing ID. Okay, and then otherwise, if we were able to save the reservation, then we want to create a checkout session for this. So we're going to say session is, or like checkout session is Stripe checkout session.create. We need to give it a success URL, cancel URL, and payment, or the mode is going to be payment. And then the line items are going to be, this is interesting. So we've got to build the line items, and we will have one that is going to be price, the price data. We're going to use price data to define a price ad hoc, and the unit amount for this is going to be the nightly price for that listing. So I guess we might want to say like listing is equal to at reservation.listing now. And the unit amount here is going to be listing.nightly price. And then the quantity, for now we'll just put 1, but that's going to be like how many nights they booked. And then the currency is going to be USD, and the product. So the product is technically going to be the ID of, well, we could define a product on the fly here. Okay, so we could either define a brand new product on the fly every time someone books, or when the listing is first created, we could use the Stripe API to create a product for that listing so that we always tie back every single payment for nights back to that product. I think that's what I want to do. So it's going to be something like listing.stripe product ID. And then we also want to pass a price data. So we're going to dynamically pass in the, this is going to be like the number of nights, nights, which we can derive from the reservation eventually, like once we figure out how to pass in like the start date and end date of the booking. So the unit amount here is going to be something, currency is going to be USD, product again is going to be, oh gosh, should we have a separate product for the cleaning fee? Should we have a product that is related to the listings cleaning fee, or have that be a separate product? I think maybe we just have one top level product for all of clearbnb that represents the cleaning fees. Anyways, once we have the checkout session, then we can say redirect to checkout session.url. The other thing we want to do here is we want to pass in the customer, and the customer is going to be current user.stripe customer ID. Okay, so we're kind of hacking around on a bunch of stuff, and I'm trying to think through all of this at the same time. But what I think, okay, so what happens is as soon as we create the reservation, we need to build out this checkout session, which is the Stripe checkout session. That's what the customer or the guest is going to see when they redirect to pay. When they redirect to pay, we want to make sure that it shows like the listing's nightly price and that the cleaning fee for the stay, but we also want it to associate those things back with the right Stripe prices and products so that we can build reports and stuff later based on those purchases. So we have a couple things we need to do. Number one, we have to go add a customer ID to the user object, a Stripe customer ID, and then figure out how to populate that and create a Stripe customer through the API when users are created or saved or whatever. And then we separately have to do this like something similar for the listing. So listing Stripe product ID. And there's a couple different ways we could do this with, we could use active record callbacks, and we can use a bunch of fanciness. But like in practice, what I think we want to do for the customer ID is right when a user signs up, or maybe even when a user logs in, we want to check to make sure that they have a Stripe customer ID. And if they don't, we want to use the Stripe API to create a Stripe customer for them. And then we'll always have a Stripe customer related to each user. And then when a listing is updated, we can make sure that it has a Stripe product ID. And if it does, then we can make sure that, well, I was also thinking to myself, like as we add images, it would be super cool if we could add those images to the Stripe product so that when you redirect, it shows the picture of the listing in the checkout session. So, all right, so for the success URL, this is where the customer will be redirected after they successfully pay. And I think we want that to be like the reservation show page. So I think we want like reservation URL. We want to use URL and not path because this needs to be like the fully qualified URL with the domain and everything. And the URL in this case is going to be back to so reservation URL for @reservation. And then if they cancel, we should just bring them back to the listing show page. So listing URL for listing. Okay, so we need to add Stripe customer ID to user. So let's go do that. Rails G migration add Stripe customer ID to users. Stripe customer ID is a string. Let's open this up. That looks good. Rails Db Migrate. I don't think I've set up any jobs yet in this application. We've done jobs in other projects. So I think we're going to do this stuff synchronously for now, but in practice, I would do like creating the customer for the user and creating the product for the listing in the background as part of background jobs. So we also need to do that for the listing, right? Add Stripe product ID to listings. And this is going to be Stripe product ID. Because I didn't spell listings right there, I don't think this worked. Let's see, listings. Okay. Rails DB Migrate. Actually, you know what? For both of those, we want to add a uniqueness constraint. Yeah, whatever, it doesn't matter. I think we want them to be unique per, like we want the customer ID to be unique per user and we want the product ID to be unique per listing, but it's whatever. We'll just let that be flexible and fancy free for now. Okay, so what do we want to do? In the user model, actually, yeah, let's do our annotate situation again. And that crashed and burned. Because Reservations Controller, we don't have all of our stuff figured out yet. Where are we? Oh, unit amount here should be listing dot cleaning fee. Also, Stripe is expecting these as integer sense also, so that's like a nice convenient thing. Oh, I guess we need to do Rails Db Migrate. It looks like we only annotated the user model here, and so I'm guessing we didn't run the migration for the listings also, which it looks like we didn't. So we'll run this again. Now we've got it on the listing, so let's go to the user model. And what I want to do is here, I'm going to add a Rails after, commit callback. And we want it on update and create. After commit, okay, so let's see. So after commit, maybe create Stripe customer on create update do, or actually no, then you define a method def maybe. Okay, and then in here what we want to say is like return if Stripe customer ID, if the Stripe customer ID is not blank, or if the Stripe customer ID, if the Stripe customer ID is populated, we want to return early and not do anything. Otherwise, what we want to do is we want to create a new customer, which is going to be Stripe customer.create, and we're going to pass in some stuff, some basic stuff. So email. I guess we could pass in like their name, and then metadata. So inside of the metadata, I'm going to pass in the like, I guess we can call it clearbnb ID, and that will be self.id, like the current user's actual ID. What's nice about this is if there's ever some issue and you have data in Stripe that's pointing back at your users, but for some reason you lost track of that customer ID, you can find these by their metadata, by their clearbnb app, and you can kind of like query by that using the search API. So then here we want to say like self.stripe customer ID, or like self.update stripe customer ID is equal to customer.id. So this should this should hit the Stripe API, create a new customer. When it comes back, we're going to update our local Stripe customer ID to be that customer. Okay, so that should create a customer. And now if we come over here and we say, like inside of Rails console, oh, actually, you know what? We haven't even installed the Stripe gem or anything. So let's go to the gem file and say gem Stripe bundle install. I'm kind of like doing this from memory, and I didn't really like plan out all the different pieces in the order. So hopefully you're tracking along. So inside of the Stripe dashboard, I'm going to create a brand new account called clearbnb. It's going to be based in the United States. I'm going to say create account. I'm just associating this with like my demo stuff. So, and we're only going to use test mode for now. We're not actually going to activate anything. So then I'm going to go to the developers tab, and under API keys, I'm going to grab the API keys here for the secret key. And I'm going to set that in my credentials by saying Rails, or like set my editor and then say Rails credentials : edit. This is going to open up my credentials file, and I'm going to set my Stripe API keys. So here I'm going to say Stripe, and then secret key is the thing I just copied. Okay. So now I'm going to go into my initializers. So config initializers. I'm going to add a new one called stripe.rb. And in here, I'm going to set stripe.api key is equal to rails.application.credentials.dig stripe secret key. Now that should globally set my API key so that no matter where I'm at, if I, for instance, say Rails console here, and then I'm expecting that if I update a user, so if I say like u equals user.last, now right now u.stripe customer ID is nil, And if I look in the Stripe dashboard here, if I go back to the developers tab and look at my logs, we have no logs. And so I'm expecting that if I say u.name equals like Raymond Damore, and then if I say u.save bang, this should hit that after commit, like it should write to the database, hit the after commit callback, make an API call to Stripe to create the customer, save the customer data in Stripe, send back a customer ID. That should get saved locally. We'll also see here that the user ID is 21, so we're expecting the metadata to show like clearbnb metadata 1. And boom, look at that. Okay, so let's just look at this. We can already see like a bunch of stuff, right? Okay, so we see the begin, update, commit. Begin, update, commit. So there's two things happening. First, the commit that we're making is setting the name. Second, the commit that we're making is setting the Stripe customer ID to this ID, cus underscore blah, blah, blah. That is an ID from the Stripe API. So if we come back over here and we refresh our logs, we should now see, sometimes it's a little delayed, but yeah, okay, so here we see a post request to V1 customers, and we can scroll down, and inside of the metadata here, clearbnb 21. We got the name, we got all kinds of great stuff. So this is completely transparent to the customer. They don't actually need to see any of this stuff. But what this tells me is that I think that style of update is going to work fine. Again, like it would be my preference for this, because this is an API call, this is an external API call, I would prefer this to happen in the background. But since we haven't talked about jobs or setting any of that up yet, whatever, it's going to happen synchronously, and that's totally fine. So we're going to do the same thing, but over here it's going to be called maybe create Stripe product. The reason why I'm calling the method maybe, I'm starting with maybe, is that it's not always going to create a Stripe customer. So instead of calling it create Stripe customer and then inside of here saying like, well, if we already have the ID, technically just like return early. Then by calling the method maybe underscore, I'm saying that like we may try to create a Stripe product, we may try to create a Stripe customer, but only if we haven't already. So maybe create a Stripe product if the Stripe product ID is blank, and it's actually going to look pretty similar. So it's going to be something like product is equal to Stripe product dot create. And then we're going to have like self.update, Stripe product ID is product.id. And when we're creating products, I need to like actually look at the API reference here. Let's see. I don't recall exactly all of the stuff that products can take. So let's dig in and take a look. So products can be created with name, active, description. So the name here is going to be self.title, or just title, I guess. I don't know. I don't actually need to use self dot all these places, but it's kind of nice to be explicit. Whatever, that'll make it look a little bit cleaner. So we also want metadata. Clearbnb ID is going to be ID. What else do we want? I guess the description, our description doesn't have any limitations. I wonder if this one is going to matter. Let's leave it off the description for now. For images accepts an array of URLs that represent this product. And so what I'm thinking we should do is look at photos and grab the first one. Photos.first. Photos. Well, there might not be any photos. So what should we do there? I think we want to do an update. I think we want to do an update that says like if there's photos and there's a Stripe product ID already, then update the product and set the images. So whatever. ooh, a URL of a publicly accessible web page. So we have that here. So we can say, oh gosh, how do I get the URL from inside a model? URL for object inside model. Rails. Yeah, how do I do this URL for? It's like Rails application route URL helpers. Yes. Dot URL for. Okay. I think this is actually like an anti-pattern, but it's convenient. And again, we're taking a little bit of a shortcut here so that we can just make this happen synchronously, and we've got the right stuff set up. So in this case, the URL is going to be for self, because we're trying to generate the URL for the listing. And yeah, that should be fine, I think. What else can we pass? Tax code. I don't know what this is. I guess we need to figure out like vacation or like rental or property something. Guest. I don't know. Like this is going to be some sort of real estate something. Residential. Oh, residential cleaning services. Hey, this is the tax code we want for the other thing, which we haven't created yet, which we can do. Actually, let's do that through the dashboard. So inside of the Stripe dashboard, we're going to go to products. We're going to create a new product, and it's going to be called a cleaning fee. And this product is going to be cleaning fee for the entire stay. It's going to be, right now, like we have to create a price, but we're not actually going to use the prices that we add here because we're going to ad hoc create the prices based on the settings of the listing. So here I'm just going to set this as like $1. It's a one-time thing and it's not going to have any images. We'll just say that. Well, this is going to be our cleaning fee. So we're going to copy this product ID, and then inside of our reservations controller, this is going to be this product right here. So that's our cleaning fee. That's like just going to be a hard-coded ID. Every charge that is related to that product, we'll just say clearbnb cleaning fee. That's totally fine. Whatever. Like that's what we want. Otherwise, we want to create this Stripe product. It's going to have a name. It'll have the URL. It'll have the metadata, and it doesn't need anything else for now. And yeah, so we'll call that good. Now let's test this out. So if we say reload, bang, product, or like a listing.last. L equals listing.last. L.cleaning fee is $100 a night. L.nightly price is $2.99 a night. L.save, bang. And this should like make the API call to Stripe, create the product, come back, save it on the listing. And it failed. Missing host to link to. Okay, so this is the weirdest thing, but like anytime you want to generate a fully qualified URL where you have the domain that is included in the URL that you're redirecting to or generating, you have to specify that domain or like the first part of the URL as part of your environment. There's so many different options. Who knew? Okay, I thought this was all just like part of Action Mailer. And for a long time, I feel like it was. But I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty confused by why there's so many different ways to set the domain. There we go. Okay, that's exactly what we want. All right, now we want to go back in because we want to say L is listing.last, L. Postal code is 12345, L.save, bang. Okay, hits the Stripe API. Stripe API comes back. We've got a product. Boom. If we come back over here to our dashboard and we go to products, we should now have a new product for this new listing. Fantastic. Okay, and there's no prices. That's totally fine because the price is going to be created dynamically or ad hoc when we check out. So that's cool. All right, so now what we want to do, let's go back over to our Reservations Controller, and we've got our checkout. So now our checkout session should have the current user, it should have the Stripe product ID, and it should have the cleaning fee and all that jazz and all the amazingness. And I don't know, let's give it a whirl. So if we come over to localhost, oh, look at that. Okay, uninitialized constant Stripe. Oh, I guess we got to restart the server here. And also, why is it firing that off just when we're reloading the page? I don't know, but I'm guessing that if we look in the logs, yeah, I bet when we're logging in, we're like touching the user field. And because we're touching the user field, what are we doing? We are updating the user for some reason as part of login. Like maybe we're tracking like last logged in or something. And that is causing this maybe Stripe customer to fire, which saved the Stripe customer ID. And now if we refresh the page, it should not do that again because we've already got a Stripe customer ID now for the user that I'm logged in as. So if we go to listings, find a listing, this does not work if we don't have a nightly price. So we'll say Rails C listing.update all nightly, or listing.where nightly price is nil.update all nightly price to, I don't know, $200 a night and cleaning fee to $60. Actually, let's make these, whatever, that should be fine. Refresh. All right, so this Tenutur Site Libro has a $200 a night and $60 cleaning fee. If we click reserve, oh gosh, current user, number 1 is nil, and number 2 doesn't have reservations. So let's go to the user model and say a user has, it has many reservations. Okay, so then back over here, we just need to say before action, oh gosh, what is it again? Controller, authenticate user. Authenticate user. I think I need to make like a shortcut for that because I want to use that everywhere basically. All right, so let's log in. So we're logging in as wave@cjavdev, sign in. We're signed in. And now we're going to go to listings. We're going to go to the first one. We're going to reserve it. Ooh, crash and burn. Rails could not find a valid model for guest association. Right, okay. So reservation, guest doesn't know what type of model it is. We don't have a guest model in the database. We have a user model. So here we have to say class name user, just like this. If we refresh, what do we get? What do we get? You must either specify product or product data when creating a price. And so my guess is that this listing does not have a Stripe product ID. And .stripe product ID does not. Okay, so what we want to do is, what is this? Which listing was this? Listing 2. Listing.find2.touch. Let's see if that causes it. Boom. All right. So .touch is a way of just saying like, just update something on this model or like mark this model as updated recently. And so you'll see that the actual SQL was to update the updated at field with a new timestamp. And when it updated it and committed, that caused a check on maybe create Stripe product. And so now we have a Stripe product. So now if I refresh this, continue the form submission, it should create a Stripe checkout session. We're redirected and holy guacamole, that's amazing. So now we see the nightly rate here and we see the cleaning fee. The product, now that I'm looking at it, like I wonder if we should have the description be like price per night or something, like listing. So when we create the product, we could put the description and set this equal to like, oh, you know what we want? Well, okay, I'm given a little bit of pause because I think technically when someone is checking out, if they have several nights and they're different prices, we want to show different prices per night. So, okay, whatever, that's fine. So let's take this product ID though, and we can say Stripe product.retrieve, and we can pass in that product ID, and that should give us back the Stripe product. You'll notice that no images are set right now. Also, you'll notice that like the email is already pre-populated to wave@cjavdev, the user. That's because this checkout session will be associated with that customer's information. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in a test card number. There's several test card numbers. And here I'm just going to say wave, cjav, and then blah, blah, blah. Save my info for, okay, so you could save it if you wanted, but I'm just going to click pay. We're going to pay in test mode $260 for that reservation. We're redirected back to reservations/2. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. Number one, how do we know that we actually got paid for that reservation and that it's actually booked? Number two, how do we tell the user that they're like the status of the reservation and relate that back to the booking? Well, we have a couple things we need to do. Right here we have this session ID, but we're not doing anything with it yet. So let's go back to the Reservations Controller, and when we create the checkout session, before we redirect, let's update the reservation to have the session ID be equal to the checkout session.id. That will make it so that we can look up the checkout session based on the reservation and vice versa. The other thing we can do is set metadata on the checkout session directly that has the reservation ID, and we can set this equal to @reservation.id. Recall that we already saved the reservation here. It's already saved in the database, and yeah, so now it'll also be saved on the checkout session. The other thing that I want to do, so the checkout session just configures what the customer is going to see when they check out, right? But in practice, what I think is really helpful is when you're creating these checkout sessions is to associate the payment back with the underlying payment, or it's called a payment intent. And that is all like handled for you inside of checkout. But a nice thing that you can do when you're creating the checkout session is you can pass metadata for that nested object. So inside of payment intent data, we can set the metadata for the payment intent data to also have that reservation ID. So payment intent data metadata is also going to have the same reservation ID. That way we have the reservation attached to the checkout session. We have it attached to the ultimate payment. And this is kind of like the tool that we'll also want to use later when if we were going to do any refunding or anything like that. We could send the receipt email somewhere if we wanted. And yeah, shipping address, statement restrictor, transfer data. Okay, all of that looks cool. Okay, let's just look through these and see if there's anything else that we might find useful here. Discounts, expires at. If we wanted to create some tool that was like, if you don't finish checking out by a certain time, then we expire your checkout session. But whatever. Okay, so this feels pretty good so far, I think. Let's go through it one more time and go back to listings/101. And this one has some images, cool, whatever. We say reserve. And, oh gosh, this listing, doesn't have, it also doesn't have its whatchamacallit. So let's go to host listings and we'll open one up. This is 103. Let's edit some photos. We'll add a photo. Boom. Upload. And I think maybe that should have set the, actually, you know what? Let's just listing.find 103.touch. Okay. All right. Now when we click reserve, we should be redirected to Stripe checkout, and we are. And we see the cleaning fee. We see all this other stuff over here. Right. Okay. Next thing we want to do inside of our reservation model, right? We want to set the status enum thing to something similar to what we have over here for the status. And it's going to start off, a reservation is going to start off in pending, and then it will go to like booked or something, reserved, and then it might go to canceled. But for now, everything is going to start off in pending, and then we will mark it as booked as soon as we get a successful payment for that reservation. And the way we're going to do that is with webhooks. And I think we're going to do that in another episode because this one is running a little bit long. So we're basically going to listen for Stripe webhooks and process them as they come in. And when we process the webhook that tells us that a checkout was successful and someone paid, we'll be able to look up the reservation by the ID of the reservation on the metadata or by the checkout session. We have like several ways we can look up the reservation. We'll mark it as booked, and then we will, I guess we could also like make a canceled process where we refund the user too. And then ultimately we need to do the other side of the equation where we're paying out hosts. So there's a ton of fun stuff we got to do. But for now, let's rock it just like this, and we will we'll leave it here, and then yeah, we'll pick it up in the next episode. Thank you again so much for your time and attention. Hopefully this was useful. We're kind of like at a point where we're almost able to book and pay for a reservation and then like mark it as booked. So yeah, so we'll kind of get back at it in the next one. See ya.